All right, everyone, it's time to revisit a concept that I actually spoke of in brief some time ago, which is that of toxic masculinity. Now, of course, the term generally, for people who haven't encountered this, the term generally applies to like the idea among, third wavers, the idea that maleness in its traditional sense in some aspect, either in part or in whole, is toxic, that it's bad for everyone, that it harms the world. A new thing is they're trying to talk about how toxic masculinity causes climate change because men, feel pressured not to do like the environmentalist thing, which is, bullshit, but I guess that's what they're claiming now. What I would say the real toxic masculinity is, though, is people... well, there's two components. First, like from the Luciferian libertarian angle, I would say dudes not doing what they want to do. Like conforming is a bad thing. And this is both men and women. Like toxic femininity or whatever would be basically the same for me. It's like, why conform to anyone's expectations of you? As long as you're not harming other people, do whatever the fuck you want. But I would say the other component of real toxic masculinity is men who sort of deny that traditionalistic role of maleness, and they do it for opportunistic purposes. That is, like I spoke of, and this is the part I had talked about before, men who pretend to be like very much in with feminism and to be very like in support of third waveism and in support, they're like socialist and stuff. The kind of dudes that, they shave their legs and go to Starbucks and then wear, they go out with their Zier friend or whatever with a shirt that says like, I'm a girl too, or something like that. And they do that, it's a dating strategy in some cases, and a mating strategy. What you're seeing is that men who are not physically dominant are adopting sort of a form of camouflage in order to blend in and get in with the females. That's basically, evolution is literally causing this. This conforms, by the way, to my idea that we're approaching the edge of a very bad behavioral sink, and that these behaviors that we're seeing are the result of pheromonal overload. What I hypothesize is, and this is why it's more prevalent in urban areas, by the way, men and women are in constant contact with one another, with individuals of all ages and varieties. Our bodies are very much driven by our olfactory senses when it comes to mating, when it comes to the biochemical signals that make up our sex drive, our behavioral patterns, and everything like that. There's no reason to expect that because population density is growing and growing, and we can see the birth rate dropping off, especially in those regions, almost invariably across the world. I believe there's no reason that we should reject the idea that that's due to people's olfactory senses constantly being bombarded. What nature is doing is it's a mechanism to prevent overpopulation. It's a mechanism to try to soften the blow by preventing mating. And part of that is behavioral. You've got a lot of men who don't do sort of the more typically aggressive male thing. Not aggressive like punching people and stupid shit like that. I smoke Marlboros and drive my Mustang and I'm a cowboy and, stupid like very cliche shit. But I mean like, being a family man, like, being supportive and stuff, emotionally there, being the breadwinner or whatever. And culture has caused this too, because culture actually, especially fiscally, has now made it very difficult for people to be in a single income scenario for the most part, unless one of the people in the relationship has a high income. Like if you have a normal income, it's very difficult, if you're going to have kids at all, certainly, to get by. Now Trump has actually helped to solve this by doubling the child tax credit to $2,000. So now like large families are getting substantial relief, which is a good thing, by the way. But that's what I think. The real toxic masculinity is poisoned men that refuse to be men. And it's unpopular to say this, like some people say, well, you're being sexist. I don't really care what people do in their personal lives. And I identify it's not even really intrinsically their fault. And radical feminism is the counterpart to that. The same pheromones that are overloading people, sexually, basically, at all ages, are acting on females, making them more aggressive. Making that, and we saw this with Calhoun's mouse paradise experiments. It's exactly the same sort of thing. You have near unlimited resources. As far as food and shelter, most people have a place to sleep and they're not starving. They've got all that they need. They can breed out of control. They've begun to stop breeding. I realize that humans aren't mice, but there's no, again, evolution would tell us that there would be similarities there. And it's kind of vestigial because, people now, they can basically chemically castrate themselves as birth control and shit. But nature is telling us, hey, there are too many people around, and resources are not actually unlimited. You need to stop having children. What's a good way of doing that? Make the men very feminized so that they're not approaching the females. Very few of them will end up having mating opportunities, while at the same time there's a little bit of psychological subversion there where they're trying to at least gain sexual gratification by pretending to be more feminized than they are. And then you have females that are uninterested and even use warning colors, like the pink hair is a warning color thing has been spoken of. They're correct. Yeah, that's absolutely a sort of behavioral strategy to show dominance. You can even see it in the difference between sort of the left and right, loosely when we're talking about like a political discourse, or I'd say political strategies. There's a big difference between the two. The liberal strategy being now more aggressive, actually, sort of browbeating people, precluding argumentation for fear of losing the argument by censorship or by making it seem like any argument is automatically a bad or evil thing. Yeah, there's plenty of toxic masculinity, but toxic masculinity is not some dude saying, yeah, I want, I want a kid, or, I just dress in blue jeans, have a blue-collar job, or something like that. There's nothing toxic about that. The idea of the traditional Western-style nuclear family is a fundamentally noble concept. Now, of course, there is a moralistic flip side. The old moralism, before the postmodern moralism, was very much similar in that it tried to enforce that sort of view even on people who can't really enjoy it. Again, my libertarian perspective comes to the fore. And I would say that even though there were a lot of happy families, like the Cleaver sort of thing, or Andy Griffith sort of tale back in the day, there were also a lot of desperately unhappy marriages where a woman had basically been married off at a young age, had an abusive husband, was not supported, or the dude, honestly, like he was in a dead marriage, a very frigid marriage, and didn't have his own romance really, and just sort of did it in order to have the family and to live up to societal expectations. I think that so often what ends up happening is when people talk about this, they take a black and white approach. They think that it's some sort of grand struggle between having a 50s style nuclear family ideal, sort of the right-wing moralism, or the left-wing moralism of a free-for-all where everyone does whatever the hell they want. There are no expectations whatsoever, or there are expectations to invert the old moralism. That is, that it becomes just as authoritarian, in fact worse, because it's the one that's active at the time. But it's just an inversion of the old abuse that happened. Before, you would have woman constrained by man expected to do the work, certain clothes that they would wear, certain things they would or would not say, like they shouldn't even sleep in the same bed unless they're making a baby, it's dirty and stuff like that. And now you've got the total inversion. Now it's like, you should sleep around but don't have kids. Do whatever you want, but if this is what you want to do, if you want the traditionalism and the family and stuff, no, that's bad, it's evil and wrong. You're not allowed to want these things because it's become abnormal. It's become biologically abnormal among most groups of people. Now, of course, you don't see this in certain parts of the world that are still developing. Why is that? It's not all cultural. Part of it is biological. Part of it is literal, and you're going to start seeing it, I think, more and more. When people say, like, oh, in 50 years, Africa's population will be like 10 billion. No, it won't. No, it won't. The urban centers with most of the concentrations of population, their birth rates are going to start dropping like a rock no matter what happens. That's my own feeling. Wait like 10 or 20 years and you'll see it begin to happen. People thought it would never happen in Asia. It's already happening. Look at Japan's demographic crisis. Jesus. Look at South Korea. I think they're even worse now, aren't they? And China's coming along too. Even in India, they're going to start having a slowdown. Here in the United States, things are a little bit less prevalent. They're like, well, why is the United States uniquely more right-wing, so to speak, than like Europe? Look at our population density. A little bit different now, isn't it? It's not all just cultural. Again, and there's nothing wrong with what anyone wants to do in their life, as long as they're not victimizing others. The problem is that third waiverism, taken to its logical final extent, is a form of moralism, We have to stop thinking about it in terms of left and right, like moralism versus progressivism. No, it's become another form of moralism. It was just a sort of behavioral and political struggle that happened over time. It became entrenched in part of the new establishment, and now because it's part of that establishment, it's becoming more authoritarian over time. You will inevitably see that reverse too. Like when populations begin to collapse, it'll be, I think, a little bit different. That's about all. Peace out.